batia 4 horas de manhã, 4 horas de tarde. Comecei a sentir que a bola fazia realmente uma curva de 2 metros, 2,5 metros.
Welcome to another episode of Folha Seca. Today we're joined by Lorin Parys, CEO of the Belgium Pro League and former Chief Operating Officer of Club Brugge. Lorin, great to have you here.
Well, great to be here.
You started your career in football in 2011 as COO of Club Brugge, a role you held alongside the same position at a company outside of sports. What exactly did your role at Club Brugge involve, and what were the main lessons you took from that experience?
Well, I was involved with Club Brugge for a while before I actually became its COO for one season. And it was basically the stadium project that I was working on as a real estate developer, working for Bart Verhagen, who then went on to buy the club. And that's also the reason that he asked me to step in. And in that moment of change, I would say, take on the role of COO. And what I remember is that Club Brugge has always been one of Belgium's biggest clubs with lots of fans and a rich history of sporting success. But it hadn't really evolved as a modern sports organization and not as a company as well. So I think that the year that I spent there as COO was a very fun year because there were so many things to be done to bring it up to speed that every project that you took on immediately had huge returns because we started profiling fans and we started collecting data and we started thinking of ourselves no longer as an organization that just sold seats to once every 2-week games, but more as a company that really sold a lifestyle and that was a 24/7 organization in terms of providing news and updates to fans and making sure that people came much sooner to the stadiums and stayed much longer after a game, and all the things that we still talk about today. We started experimenting with when we took over the club, and that was just really fun to do. So there was a whole field to discover and to explore. So fond memories of that time.
Usually when you think about a football club, it's not that often that you hear people speaking about stadium real estate field related subjects. Did that particular learning curve, like what key learnings have you learned from that you eventually apply now at the Belgian Pro League?
I think the most important lesson, basically for everyone who has big plans in Belgium, but definitely if you want to develop real estate such as a stadium, is that there's many more stakeholders than you would think of in the very early stages of the project. So basically, the stadium project has been in the works for 17 years, and I think it's finally going to get done. But of course, it's a project that involves national politics, local politics, neighbors in the current setup, neighbors in the location where you might want to build, and so uh, telling a story that ties all those interests together and making it real is maybe the most important lesson that I picked up there. Next to, of course, the lesson that football is so much more than the 90 minutes that we play at a home base every 2 weeks. So those are the two big lessons that I took from the real estate experience on the one side, and then from the COO experience on the other.
Fast forwarding to 2022, when you took over as the Pro League CEO, the league was coming out of a difficult period with your predecessor resigning due to the fallout of a match fixing scandal. How was this impacting the organization and how did it influence the scope of your work?
Well, when there's a crisis, there's always an opportunity, and that's a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. And so basically, you had a knowledge that all of the leaders started to share, that we had to do things differently. And so one of the first things that we did was come up with new rules. Financial sustainability rules. I think we're one of the very few leagues that has very strict soft salary caps for its first and for its second division. We are now requiring every club to basically build up its own capital. We put in new licensing requirements, for example, making sure that everyone who has a management position has gone through the Pro League Business School, which is a collaboration with the University of Antwerp. But we also required our clubs to spend a minimal amount of their revenue on youth development, on G football, on women's football. And we also changed our governance. So basically, giving clubs the rights to determine licensing criteria, TV rights, and the format of the competition, but then really work like a modern organization with a management that has a degree of autonomy, that has a small but efficient board of directors, meaning that we have 4 representatives of our clubs on the board, and we have 2 independents. And there's one of the independents is the chairman of the organization. And so doing all of that, we called it Football First, where we took a new start with Belgian football, has been possible because we came out of a very difficult period. And I think without having traveled through that very difficult moment in time for Belgian football, maybe we wouldn't have done those things.
Yeah, yeah. We will go through it through the plan in a bit. Just asking you something that, as we know, your role implies managing relations with clubs, the National Football Federation, ACFF. Now, I will probably not say this correctly, but Voetbal Vlaanderen,
Yeah,
and other partners
it's
as
a very
well.
nice attempt, I have to say, Pedro. Yeah.
As well as developing policies and leading the Pro League as a whole. So, my question for you is, which areas have you focused on most so far, and how do you envision your strategic roadmap unfolding over the coming years, particularly in terms of its different phases of implementation?
Well, I think the fun part of being in a position as CEO of the Pro League is that you really have to do all of these things together and at the same time, because politics will come up with proposals that have an impact on you. So you cannot choose, to say, oh, we're going to deal with this later. The first thing that I did was put together a security plan, because we had too many incidents in our stadiums, and we determined that it was an impediment to our growth if people didn't feel safe enough to go to each and every game. So and then of course you have to build trust with your clubs. You have to give them transparency about what you're doing, where you're heading. You have to develop a strategy, and then you have to make sure that the other members of the football family in Belgium are actually on board, because you need each other each and every day for small and greater things. So I teach at the University of Leuven a course, and I always say that if you think that the liberty to make policies of a league is about the size of a football field, I try to explain them that at the end of the course they understand that it's basically just a square centimeter in the end, because either you need UEFA or FIFA, fixes a match calendar that has an impact on your format. There can be a minister who limits publicity for online gambling operations that might have an impact on your revenue stream. So the interesting part is that it's impossible to say what you do first and what you do next. We knew what we did first, but then of course events happen. First was security. Second was financial stability. Then it was governance. Then it was format. Then of course it was preparing for the next TV rights cycle. Then it was putting a plan together for youth development. then for women's development, and then we determined that if we're not going to be one of the bigger leagues, then we should be one of the smarter ones. And that's one of the things that we try to do, and we have a strategy and a roadmap that has to bring us there. But then of course stuff happens, and you have to adjust.
And there is a sentence you like a lot from Professor Rogan Taylor that says football is more than just a business. No one has their ashes scattered
Yeah.
down the aisle or at Tesco. And the reason why you like a lot this sentence is because it tears football and sports in general apart from like several other industries, to not say all the other industries, maybe with some exceptions. So what would be the main challenges when it comes to think about Pro League's vision that comprises, as we know, focusing on community building with the mission also to connecting people through strong emotions. So, what are the main challenges for this?
Well, when I started, I thought that football was too much like a planet on its own, and that we should bring it back to the heart of society where it really belongs. And then you have to make it insightful that our clubs do 800 local social projects every year, that we bring 100,000 people who are in a disadvantaged situation every year towards, the middle of society, again through football. And so that knowledge, it didn't really fundamentally change what our clubs were already doing, but the fact that we started communicating about it, the fact that we started saying this is also part of the mission that we have to fulfill to be a motor for social projects, and for social change, where we can help people get through difficult periods. That is something that we found to be very important. And of course, it brings football into society in a different light. And that's essential if you think about a football organization not only as a sporting organization, but it's at the same time a business, and at the same time it's a cultural institution. So that makes it so complicated, but also so interesting and so dynamic. Because if Tesco wants to change their letters in terms of coloring, I don't think anyone will object, or there might be some funny memes about it online, but that's probably where it will stop. If a football club does that, there's a whole town, and if it's a national team, a team that goes far wider than its locality, that will have a say about it, that will be upset about it, that wants to be involved in it. So that, I think, is the beauty of what we get to do every day, and what we have to make apparent also for people who follow football, that it's so much more than 90 minutes playing on a pitch.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Also, of course, sustainability and youth development are central to the league's vision. However, the latest finances show a complex picture because, on one hand, you have record profits from player sales of 178 million in 23-24, but on the other hand, overall club losses, while improved, remain high at 160 million euros. You've pointed to the Football First plan from 2022 that you've just mentioned as the driver for progress, particularly with what regards salary control. Could you outline its key financial measures and explain how they're designed to improve and hopefully solve, of course, this core challenge?
Yeah. So first of all, we took a picture when I started about the financial situation, and then we said, you get 1 year to make the picture, to get your preparations in place, to then implement on a 5-year term the new financial regulations that we put into place. And so basically, over the course of 5 years, we are now requiring our clubs to spend no more than about 70% of what their revenue stream is on salaries for sports and on staff. So basically, that is a soft salary cap that's commensurate with your income. When I started, there was a club that had more than 160% of their revenues were going towards player salaries. And that's very unhealthy, because if you don't have sound financials, your club becomes prey to um, a takeover that might not be in the best interest of the club, but you might just not have a choice. And so, if you want to give fans stability, it also means financial stability. So, that's one very important aspect. Another important aspect of the new regulations that we put into place over a 5 year term is the fact that you need to have positive equity as a club. So, basically, that means you have an internal bank account that you can rely on, and it gives you a buffer when something happens. And in football, something unforeseen always happens. So, in order to give fans a view towards more stability, and to make sure that our leadership teams in our clubs were building towards a future where they had, the destiny of their own clubs in their own hands, and not in the hands of someone they had to deliver it to because there was no other choice financially, we put that into place. And so we are announcing in February record results. So I can't really say anything about the numbers yet, but the improvement for our first division is gigantic. So basically, when I started, we had a cumulative loss of more than 220 million, I think. Last year, which was the second full year that the numbers were already into effect, we went to 160, and I'm very confident that the new numbers that we'll announce in about 2 months and a half will show record improvement. And that I find very heartening, because the rules really work, but the rules can, of course, only be a reflection of a culture. And I think that we're working towards a new safety culture. We're working towards a new financial sustainability culture. I still do think that we pay our players way too much, yeah, because wage inflation is still an issue. And I think that basically we're on the right track, but we have not arrived yet.
How do you see the role of club owners in this? Because they've reportedly injected like 747 million euros into their club since 2020. Do you view them? Do you see them as being really important, or?
Yeah, of course, it's crucial, because we also have a rule that limits the losses that a club can incur over a period of time. And so that means that when they do go over, the amounts that we have foreseen, we now have put into place not only financial sanctions, but also sports sanctions, which I think is very important, because it shows you that the regulations really have teeth. Now, the owners, of course, are responsible to make sure that they've bridged the gap between potential loss and being break even. And so society as a whole, does not in any way support the losses that they make, but the owners are the ones who really usurp all those financial losses. And we made a rule that they can put new money into a club, but it has to be an increase in capital. So we saw in the past that they gave loans that they could recall at their own beck and call, and we saw that there were a number of uh, marketing contracts that were concluded that weren't substantiated. So we did away with that, and we said, well, as an owner, you can still, of course, put money into your own company, which is your club, but you will have to lock the money in through a raise in capital.
Yeah. When you mention that the club owners must cover losses, this is only if it exceeds 5 million euros, isn't
Yeah,
it? Or
exactly. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay. And maybe you've already mentioned a couple of them, but of course that the league has also really strict licensing conditions, and these ones have been tightened over the last few years. You claim also, like, for you it's clear that you are the only league with such strict rules for the first and second divisions. Which, like, considering all of these, the main rules, which rules are those?
Well, so what I mentioned before, and the fact that you only can have about 70% of your revenues that you spend towards sports staff and salaries of players. The fact that you need to have a positive net equity, and the fact that you need to spend at least 5% of your earnings on um, women's football, investments in youth, or for example G football. And we think that's important because that shows that we're serious about making a commitment toward future football generations, and that the money can't just go to um, dividends or anything other than reinvestment for a certain percentage of the revenue into the future of the club.
Your investment in youth development has been increasing a lot over the years. Like if we take the value from 2022 and the one from 2024, it increased by 59% up to 78 million euros, alongside, of course, smaller investments in women's football and social responsibility. And as we know, this strategy drives financial sustainability because on one hand you have lower wages, probably, and by of course trying to promote homegrown players, and on the other hand you have the revenue from the player sales, mainly to the big five, in which you are really good. um, I think this explains a lot why you have the second lowest average age on the pitch out of 50 leagues, just behind Slovenia, according to CEIS. Uh, Breaking down those 78 million figure, in which specific areas of youth football is that capital are actually being deployed?
Well, it's mainly in our academies. So basically, you need to know where you sit in the whole football ecosystem. And for the Belgian Pro League, we want to be and remain one of the three biggest purveyors of talent to the five big leagues in the world. And so we're number 8 in Europe in terms of UEFA coefficient, and we're one of the three purveyors of talent to the G5. So if we want to keep that position and even look up, then of course we have to keep investing in the future, and that's very simple. That's youth development. So what we've done is, we work together with the national federation, which is important that you don't have boats that go into different directions. And secondly, we have a youth development plan that we put together with our clubs for the elite youth competitions. And so also there we have strict licensing criteria that evolve over time and become a little stricter, and that really rewards clubs who are successful in making young players evolve through their own development program and end up playing in the first team of a club. So it's just thinking about all of these things together, going into the right direction, and stimulating healthy competition between clubs in investing in youth and investing in youth academies, making sure that the necessary infrastructure is there. That's really what we are trying to foster as a climate for youth. But then also, and that's then of course what we do as a league. We overlay that with a new data strategy, in which I think we're one of the very few leagues that starts at the U13 level, the elite youth competition, to start tracking player data, match data, so that we can give players more insights in what they're good at, what they need to be improving on. We need to give clubs more handles to be competitive on the European scale. And that's something that we can do as a league because we installed it as a league-wide deal. And so we created a Pro League Performance Hub that makes sure that that data is comparable, benchmarkable, insightful. And so all of these things together make for the strategy that we in Belgium really adhere to, which is investing in our youth.
I believe that we still can say that the Belgian Pro League is the first and only still European league to collect and centralize data from the under 13 on upwards, as you just mentioned. Uh, how does this translate into a real competitive edge on one hand? And on the other hand, how do you try to coach the youth coaches to make them the best use out of the data and not to be just, just data dependent and forgetting other important aspects?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because what we try to do in answer to that last question is put them together a lot, and basically have them learn from each other. It's not the league, that is necessarily the smartest or most experienced person in the room. It's the fact that we can create the table where experiences are shared, where people learn from each other, where there is a climate where you can agree on big principles that you work towards as a collective of clubs. And that's what we do. So basically, in terms of the data, we have super users, that are really adept at finding insights in data, that we have presenting their cases and how they work at their club towards the other clubs. We have seminars with the data providers, that show us where there are areas that aren't explored or insights that can be found. But of course, the biggest threat in having a lot of data is getting lost into a jungle of data points. It's what you do with it, and also the choice you make about which data that you take into account and which data that you disregard. So that's our role, I think. And how does that give us a competitive edge? It gives us an edge because we always try to do something that no one else is doing, or where we're the first. And then, of course, we talk to our colleagues at the European level and we tell them what they're doing, and we hope that they catch on, so that we can start benchmarking data with similar systems that they might put into place. And then we try to think ahead, because we know that others will follow, and that we'll have to find another edge, another way of working, another insight that makes us do something different. And we're talking here about elite sports, so that means that the edge is sometimes very, very small, but it's that really small part that makes the difference in the end. And so it's fun to always try to find the new thing. And for us, the Pro League Performance Hub is something that we rolled out at the beginning of this season, so we're still learning, but we're already seeing great uptake with the clubs in terms of how they're using it. So ask me again, Pedro, what that did to our youth development in a year or two. Yeah.
Yeah, like the reason for my question is, in my opinion, these shouldn't put leagues aside from, of course, investing in data. Otherwise, it's just a warning to make the best use out of it. And I think it makes part of a broader question. That is, for instance, to not lose sight from of late major players. But this hasn't to do just with data, but also with getting the how can I say it, like to have the youth coaches more sensible to know what they should be looking or not into to the youth players, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's true. And as in any league, you have clubs of very different sizes, clubs with very different policies. We have clubs with more than 200 or even towards a 300 people payroll, and we have clubs with a couple of people on their payroll as well, and they're all part of the league. So I think our challenge in the future will be to try to put together clubs that can really learn from each other, because if you're too far apart, there's nothing that you can learn from listening to each other either. So our challenge will be to make sure that we start to work more tailored vis-a-vis our clubs. Yeah.
What, thinking about the short, medium, and long term, what would be the goals of the Belgian Pro League?
Well, we're in a little bit of a pickle regarding our media rights deal. So I know what my short term goal is, and that's making sure that our fans can keep consuming our content. That's the very immediate short term, of course. Medium term and long term, yeah. It's the media rights landscape in which we have to find the right answers. To make sure that our clubs can continue to use the stable cash income that has always provided in the last couple of years, and on the other side, that we keep connecting with young fans and with a large uptake of subscribers in terms of people who want to regard um, everything that's happening around Belgian football. So I would say media rights and everything that pertains to it is definitely a big strategic goal. A second strategic goal, I would say, is making sure that we get even closer to our customers, our fans. That means getting to know much more about them, connecting with youth. And a third big challenge, I would say, is everything that's related to AI. I think we haven't thought through enough about what that could mean for professional football. So, I mean, for example, I would love, and we haven't done it yet, to have the information that we have here as a league in terms of pitch management, in terms of youth development, in terms of data points, to have them be part of a big AI challenge. And I think when we let some AI specialists loose on all those data points, they will come up with learnings and insights that I can't even think of today. So that's becoming like a smart league. I would say is my biggest third priority.
Sporting wise, would you say that arriving and keeping the top six UEFA coefficient place, would this be the sporting goal?
Well, all of these things that I just mentioned are in relation to our ultimate goal, which is the one that you've just enunciated, which is that I think we're number 8 today, and I always say we should look up, so for us, we know that we'll never be one of the big 5 leagues in Europe, but we can strive to be, the little scrappy league that could, that is smart, that's innovative, and that always tries to experiment with new stuff so that we can go up in the coefficient ranking and keep our place in Europe.
Thinking about the Belgian Pro Leagues and also the Belgian markets, a unique edge to achieve and sustain all your ambitions, what would be like just trying to find like practical things that you could make use of? What would you say would be the things that yeah, help you in this road?
It's a difficult question, I think, because practically, I believe in the fact that we have so much knowledge that sits within our clubs that I'm going to say something that sounds rather vague, but that to me can have the biggest effect, which is the fact that you put them together and that they learn from each other. That is, I think, the biggest thing that we could do as a league to help our clubs evolve. So that might sound rather vague, but I think that's really important towards the clubs. Then towards the fans and towards clubs as well is basically looking at how you can combine resources maybe with some other medium-sized leagues in Europe in terms of working together in the back office to create scale, to maybe attract new investment, and to make sure that you put that money to good use and to come up with new kinds of media rights deals, new kind of production deals, new kinds of investments in clubs that you can sponsor with that kind of investment. So I think it's an ever evolving story, but one that always comes back to how can you be different? How can you be smarter? How can you provide your clubs with that little edge that makes the difference?
Is it a concern of yours to create like workshops, networking events also among clubs, like maybe also inviting some expert groups from each club in each field? Is this something that you often do or not
Yeah,
much?
yeah, we do that all the time. So we do it, we do it on security, we do it on marketing. We just had a marketing day last week. We also had other sports come and tell us what they do. We had a stadium summit last week in which clubs were basically talking about their projects, how they'd achieved certain builds, what their challenges were, how policy interacts with that. So we do it all the time, and I think that's really fun because you always learn something new. And then, of course, we have the Pro League Business School where we have continuing education for our clubs, which I thought was really weird when I started. That there was no. I think every sector, uh, has their own education mechanism. Only in football there was none. Now we started with a course for technical directors together with the federation, and so we try to do and keep doing all of those things to make everyone smarter, more equipped to make better decisions. And that's something that we try to work on continuously. Yes.
Just on that, Lorin, you just mentioned the federation. How important is it for you to be fully aligned with them? Because I think it's a good example to show it.
But I think it's very important because you need each other, and you need each other every day, so it matters large and small. And so, of course, there's going to be issues that you don't see eye to eye with, and then everybody should have the liberty, to pursue their own policy. But in a general way of speaking, I think getting along with the other members of the football family in your country is a condition to success. I've seen too many times in too many other countries that so much energy is lost in basically political fights about sometimes unimportant stuff, but that means that energy is drained towards things that don't matter. And so of course you're going to talk and you're going to disagree on some things, but if there is a level of trust that you start from, then that's perfectly feasible and shouldn't be an impediment to success. But you cannot be successful, I think, if you're spending your energy on the wrong things. And for me, the eye on the ball is literally, how can we make our clubs stronger? How can we grow our category? How can we get closer to our fans? That's the stuff that we should be spending energy on, and that's what I also try to put into practice.
Because sometimes people could think that there are two different entities, but in the end there are lots of subjects in which you need to dialogue and such, right?
But I think our governance helps because the board of directors of our federation consists of 10 board members, four of which are appointed by the Pro League, two of which are appointed by the Dutch-speaking amateur federation, and two by the French-speaking federation. And then, of course, you have two independent board members. So it really assures that you cannot drift dramatically apart, because your organizations, they are intertwined not only in their operational business but also in their strategic focus.
Speaking about Pro League's format, from next season onwards, the league will feature 18 teams without playoffs, aligning the league with most European domestic leagues, being the current season a transitional one. In your view, this is good news since you're meeting the fans' favorite format, according to some polls. Could you describe the new format, because it's better if you do it than myself, and explain why it's give and take with the right overall balance, as you said, and hence why this change is so important?
Well, you can talk and discuss formats until the end of time, and everybody has an opinion on it. So basically, we are going to a very simple format, which is 18 round robin. So at the end of the season, the best team wins. So that's been a fan favorite for a long time. It's not been the reason that we switched to 18 and that we basically did away with the playoffs, because I think playoffs are a very good and interesting part of a competition, because they make sure that there is a suspenseful end. Definitely, given the proof or the evidence is there, because the last three seasons, we always had to rent a helicopter because we didn't know where we had to deliver the Champions Cup at the end of the season. That's what you want. You want you know clubs that are really so close to each other that on the last day of your match calendar, you can still have different teams being crowned champion. So in terms of changing the formats, it's really been driven by the IMC, by the international match calendar that's being fixed by FIFA, and also by UEFA. Because what happens is that in the format that we used to play with 16 teams, with a playoff of 6 at the end of the season, and then a relegation playoffs as well, we needed so many match days that with the recent changes to the calendar that UEFA and FIFA have made, it became nearly impossible to put together a calendar, because of course you need enough match weekends to be able to do that. But if national teams, if new Champions League competition formats take up more windows, then you have less flexibility. And it basically came down to the fact that we no longer had a winter break, that if we had a snow day, it became nearly impossible to find a space on the calendar to plan it in again. And so our teams who are competitive in Europe said, we're playing one of the highest number of games in Europe every season, and it has an impact on our European performance, because we're just playing too many games with not enough rest in between. So in the European leagues, we try to have a more balanced calendar, and we try to converse with FIFA and UEFA, and that's only successful to a very basic level of success, I would say, that we have gained there in terms of traction. But as a national league, you have to try to marry a lot of interests. The top team saying we're playing too many games. We had a lot of mid-tier clubs saying that with the relegation system that we had into place, was basically a relegation playoff with 4 teams, it's too risky in the end, and it leads to bad financial decisions. So and then we had a demand for more solidarity from our second division, and a question of being able to field a fixed number of U23 teams in that second division. So if you put everything together, the clubs need to agree on a new format with a 2/3 vote. That's where we ended up. So luckily, that is also a fan favorite, but it's a really difficult decision to come to with 29 football clubs. Because I always make the comparison, Pedro. Is there another sector in the world except for football where you put 29 competitors who want to win from each other every weekend together in a room, and they need to agree with a 2/3 majority on the rules of engagement? And if you then also know that everybody has widely diverging interests, and you have a press corps that daily needs to produce stories about what's going on in the league with the clubs, then that's a cocktail that that can be very explosive, and that I've never seen anywhere else, because uh, it's so special what we do, and it's also sometimes very difficult to come up with good solutions. So that's a little bit of background about how we ended up going from 16 to 18 clubs and yet playing less match days.
I understand that these so different interests are also the reason why you had only one vote more than the minimum mark, right?
But the minimum mark was 2/3. So you have to know that it was a super majority.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And I think we had 2 or 3 votes over, so I can't remember, but it was close, that's for sure. But you have to know that you need to have 2/3
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
votes in the General Assembly, which is a very high
yeah,
threshold, of course,
for sure.
to make something pass. Yeah.
For sure. The number that was reported back then was that the votes were 34, where the minimum was 33 over 49.
Possible. I don't know. I don't know it anymore by heart. The only thing that counts, of course, in the end, is that it was passed with a super majority, but it was close. That was definitely the case. Yeah.
No, no, for sure. I mean, I can't imagine how tough that should be. But Lauren, just getting back on what you were mentioning
Yeah.
about the main differences on the new format, you already said it. Like you will have a winter break over the 26-27 season. European teams will be able to postpone some matches across qualifiers
Yeah.
and throughout the European campaign. About the higher financial solidarity. For the second division clubs. How will that work exactly? And I guess also that the smaller clubs in the pro league, they were also happy, right, by the fact that they don't have anymore these relegation playoffs.
Yeah, so we integrated four U23 teams, so a fixed number, not fixed clubs, of course, in the Challenger Pro League competition. They each pay a start fee of €1 million, which is a lot of money, and that makes that we have about €10 million to divide among the regular clubs in the Challenger Pro League. So that is actually a substantial increase in the financial means of those clubs, and that's something that was also a question that was on the table and something that we strive for. So I think all in all, it's a balanced result without losing sight of is it something that our fans will actually be happy with in the end. And of course, now that we're playing the last season, a season including playoffs, the playoff fans are waking up, and of course they're also sad that we're basically saying goodbye to them. But I'm sure that 18 straight will also be a format that yields incredible stories, and we call ourselves the only purveyors of unscripted drama in a world where everything is scripted. So I'm sure that will continue to happen.
If it hadn't been the international match calendar, do you think that you would have remained with the same format?
No. So I think the pressure really came from the international match calendar. And if it hadn't taken so many extra weeks out of our schedule, then the pressure to change would not have been the same. No.
In mid 2022, the Belgian clubs introduced the new competition format, effective from the 23-24 season, as we already said, with limited changes, notably everything that you already said. And back then, you said that sustaining this format until 2030 was important to provide stability for clubs and the fans. But as you mentioned, right, like the format, everyone has a different opinion. Maybe you face like different kind of pressures from different sides. So my question is, what gives you the confidence that this stability will be achieved this time?
So, Pedro, if I have to look back at everything that I put forward as an ambition, that's one where I failed, So I think you have to be honest and clear about that. I always said that it was important in terms of TV rights, that we kept the old format. And then, of course, we got bits in that basically were indifferent as to the format. So then, of course, part of that reasoning falls away. It has always been also an economic reasoning. So is it important to keep stability? Yes, I think it is, because it goes towards the fan and what he can expect, and if that changes too often, um, that's not a good thing. Can I guarantee that the format will remain unchanged? I don't guarantee that, and I can't because of the simple reason that there's 5 decisions that our clubs make themselves. And so, when I said that we have new governments, we also said that clubs make their own decisions when it comes to format, to licensing, and basically to TV rights and the distribution key that is related to that. I think it's a good thing that clubs about the essentials of the game can decide themselves, but that also means that it's out of your hands. So you can never say with 100% certainty that a format will remain unchanged, because if there is a two-third majority to change something, that will happen.
I know the Belgian media rights situation is sensitive at the moment,
Mhm.
so keeping these broad, how do you balance accessibility for older fans facing digital barriers, such as navigating OTT platforms like DAZN, against the need to engage a younger generation that more readily turns to the Premier League and broader global entertainment?
Well, we don't see that in Belgium in our fan surveys. We remain, even with the fact that currently we're only to be seen on the streaming platforms. We don't see, as Nielsen research shows, that the importance of our competition would diminish. So I think that's important to know, that in different countries, the Premier League or the Champions League have different audiences than in Belgium. In Belgium, it's the Jupiler Pro League that sits atop of the pyramid, which I think is a good thing. Of course, our media rights situation, the best thing I could say about it is that it's in flux at the time that we talk. And so we will have to work towards broader distribution than is the case today, and that's also foreseen under the media rights agreement. The telcos and the streamer just have to agree on a distribution deal, but they haven't been able to do so. And if you can do that, then you have broad distribution, but you also have audiences that want to consume it via an app, and so very differently. I think that's good. I think what a league should strive for is to give its consumers and its fans choice. And if we can do that, we'll be happy. Obviously, we have work to do.
Despite the Challenger Pro League benefiting from increased solidarity and financial support with its revised formats, the structure of the league post 2026 remains undecided. Maybe this has changed already, right? Because you were mentioning the under 23 squads, that it could feature either 14 or 16 teams. So, yeah, my question is, with this inclusion, how will the look like?
So basically, it's foreseen that there is a form of flexibility in the number of teams that can play in the Challenger Pro League, because we have those 4 slots that are foreseen for the U23 teams. And there's a challenge towards the format. So we'll have to see by the end of the season what the final decision there is. And of course, we try to work on solutions as well, but there is not much more that I can say about that at this point in time.
Okay, okay. In one of my talks for the podcast, one of the last ones with Jan de Jong, Eredivisie CEO, we touched upon one of the challenges they face due to the fact that the Netherlands is a very small country, and also their lack of policemen. There are regulations where you can play and you cannot play. For example, in Rotterdam, there are now 3 professional clubs playing in the Eredivisie, and they can never play on the same day at home. All
Mhm.
these makes it very complicated, of course, to make the schedule. Being the total area of Belgium around 3 quarters of the Netherlands, do you face the same struggle or not?
Yes, we do. Because, of course, our scheduling basically is very complicated, because in Bruges, for example, we have 2 teams who play in the same stadium. But it's also a historic town with lots of events, like a marathon or other events that take place there, like a cycling competition. So we have to take that into account. We have to take into account that for a number of clubs, the police requires us to play during daylight times. Then, of course, we have to take into account that we need at least, the minimal hours of rest between the last game a team played, for example, in the European competition and in the national competition, such as ours. So we put together a list of, I think, 12 criteria that guide the calendar making process. And that's very challenging, because we depend on local authorities, we depend on local police forces, we depend on their availability, we depend on their requirements, to make sure that we can schedule. And if there's 29 teams, I can tell you that's really difficult, definitely if you have a format with 40 plus match days. Yeah.
Does the size of your population, which is roughly 10% larger than Portugal's, does it also suppose further limitations, further challenges?
Yeah, well, I think the challenge that a smaller country has, and maybe for Portugal it's a special case, is of course that you know your national borders and the size of your population kind of limit your growth. In the case of Portugal, it's a little bit different because the Portuguese speaking countries make up for a huge amount of potential fans. In Belgium, there's not so many people who speak Dutch. The Dutch, of course, have their own competition, and the French do as well. So it's a little different, I would say. So in terms of limiting your growth, it does, show you that you can never be one of the big five competitions in Europe. That's sheer impossible by the size of your territory.
Moreover, the Belgium minimum salary for foreign professional athletes is around 100,000 euros, even slightly lower in Brussels, whereas, for instance, in the Netherlands is approximately 6 times higher for non-European Union players aged 21 and over. Also, the number of players from outside the European Union is unlimited in Belgium, as opposed to limited in the Netherlands. These points, would they represent a clear competitive edge for you over your neighbors, let's say? Because I'm just thinking if, like, they could help you to buy talented players from outside the European Union, whereas sometimes, at least in terms of as with such large quantities and so much talented, maybe they are a bit more limited.
It's a good question, but a really difficult one to answer because every country and every competition has its own regulatory framework, and all those rules have a direct or indirect impact on the competition. And then finding a minimum salary, for example, for non-EU players in the Netherlands, the minimum salary is much higher, but in France and Germany, it's much lower. So, but then if we look at the support that the French authorities give towards stadium building and infrastructure and capacity, that's then much higher than the advantages that the Belgian authorities, convey to the professional competition. So, of course, I mean, every country has its own rules, and those rules have an impact. It's just very difficult to pinpoint. That's the thing that makes the difference. I think it's almost impossible to do that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but to
Mm.
find an artificial turf in Belgium's top two divisions, we need to go to the Challenger Pro League. And still, it seems that there are a couple of pitches in the Pro League that present a hybrid turf. What are your thoughts on this matter, and what's the plan of the Pro League to manage it?
Well, so you can have an artificial pitch in the first division in Belgium. There's now two teams, I think, that have one. So those are the rules, and it's very difficult to change the rules. Once you have teams that have based their investments on what is allowed. What to me matters is more what's the quality, of the pitches that we play on. And because we thought that there was an improvement to be made, we put in a pitch protection plan and we put in a league-wide deal with Raw Stadia to measure the quality of artificial turfs and of natural grass turfs or pitches, so that we can gradually improve where the game begins. That's basically on the pitch. And so that's where our focus is, and I think that's a general philosophy. You can have eternal debates about multi-club ownership, about foreign ownership, about pitches and what they can be made of. To me, what matters is what can we change, where do we have an impact, and let's focus on that. Like, I'm not going to be able to change all by myself, being the Belgian Pro League. the rules on multi-club ownership, which are decided at UEFA level. Um, so we look at, okay, so we can have, for example, foreign owners. It doesn't matter what's on your passport. It matters what you do as a club. And so we have rules and strict licensing conditions about investing in local social projects, etc. So that's just to illustrate that the general philosophy is, where can we have an impact, and let's focus on that. And so in terms of turfs, it's we want to be playing on quality pitches. And so as a league, I'm very excited to see the first results of our pitch management, and I hope to see improvements.
So let's say, Lorin, you never read, an article, a credible one that really stated that it increased the quality of a match when the match was played in natural grass. This for the league, it's not that clear, right? I guess.
Well, the thing is just that I've never um, really spent a lot of time on that, because I know I have teams, that have those kind of pitches, that play by the rules in having them installed. And so it's just really difficult to change that rule if we wanted to. So I'd rather focus on where I can make a difference.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was just wondering, just to finish this matter, I was just wondering if it was in your plans to try to give some incentive to these teams to slowly change and shift to natural pitches or not, basically.
At the moment, no.
Okay, okay. And when we think about the BeNeLiga, joint league for both top Dutch and Belgian clubs, they it picked up steam between 2019 and 2021, culminating in an anonymous Belgian vote in early 2021 supporting it, despite, as it was reported, the withdrawal from the negotiations in the subsequent year of leading Dutch clubs like Ajax, Feyenoord, and PSV. Wouldn't like First of all, maybe if you have like a different view on how the process evolved or not, and if you think this league would give Belgian football a boost both sportingly and financially.
So basically, it ended the project the day before I started my job here. So that was very interesting. I'm always for closer collaboration. That should not necessarily mean that you go to one competition. As I said earlier, I think there is work to be done in seeing how we can pool resources with a number of medium leagues and attract extra investment. I think that's the focus today. Yet, I like our Dutch neighbors a lot, and I think we should think about, for example, how can we work together? Maybe first in the women's football, we've done it in the past. We can do it in the future. It doesn't need to take the same shape or form. Um, but there I see that we have a number of top teams in both our top women's divisions, um, that have a performance gap with a number of teams that are lower classified. Maybe there is incentives that we can try to think of together, of having them play against each other, and making them both more competitive. So that's the train of thought that we are pursuing at the moment. But it's a thought. It's a potential project. It's not something real that's on the table at the moment.
Despite of UEFA having confirmed the league was possible, it seems that as Ian claimed, that two issues emerged. First, because domestic leagues had to remain and European spots wouldn't increase, so they would still be assigned by country. And second, the combined media rights weren't expected to generate significantly more value. Even though you weren't in the specific projects, do you have like any idea if these were the only blockers, or by the Belgian side if you would include further blockers, or you couldn't
But
tell?
Jan will have explained that I think it's a four-fifth vote in the General Assembly in the Netherlands. So I think four clubs in the Netherlands can block it, which also happened. I think that if there is no UEFA solution in terms of access to the European competition, and some ways of guaranteeing that both, or if it's more, that all participating countries, can fall back on access for their highest classified club, then I think there is no real future in it. And I talked recently uh, with the UEFA people responsible for this, and their thinking has not evolved yet. So as long as that remains a fact, I think that's definitely the most compelling blocking item. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What are the main arguments for them to say that they couldn't add the spots? Is it just a natural limitation of the way it is right now, or?
The way they think today is that if it's one competition, it would be strange for us to start awarding access to European competition to a team that in theory could be eighth place in that competition. So basically they're saying if you go to one competition, it is one competition, and there cannot be um, access guaranteed for teams that are not top qualified.
Yeah. In 2023, you were elected to the board of the European leagues, and right after the election, you've stated that the most important decisions in modern football are made at the international level, highlighting the success of the European leagues in increasing the amount received by the clubs not participating in European competitions from 130 million in 2021 to 308 million in the cycle 24-27. All in all, what would exactly be the European League's full scope and hence its current relevance in football's landscape, according to you?
Well, I think it's very relevant because it's the only representative of all the clubs and all the players in the European competition landscape. I think it plays a very important role in making sure that there is enough solidarity. And as you mentioned, we went from 130 to more than 300 million in this cycle, which is an important improvement. I think we can still do better and still be smarter because there is a number of issues that we have to tackle also with UEFA in terms of calendar, in terms of collaboration. And as I said, when I was elected in 23, so much of that is decided at a level that, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And I think that has happened too many times in the past. And so basically, I think mid-sized leagues and smaller leagues deserve their place at the table because we are the essential level in the football pyramid. We create um, the weekly excitement and the access that you have to gain through your pitch performance, in your national leagues. And to be able to make that happen and to have a healthy competitive balance within your domestic league, you need to influence decisions at the European level and even at the FIFA level, and that is proven to be a hard task. Yeah.
And we are approaching the end of our conversation, Lorin. But just wonder, what are your thoughts about FIFA Club World Cup's new format? If you think it's beneficial or more disadvantages?
Well, it's very easy for me to say because the qualification rules made it so that no Belgian team even had a chance, of participating. And I think that where it sits in the calendar and its potential ambitions of taking even more place in the calendar is not healthy. And I say this with the greatest respect, of course, of teams who want to compete in that competition, because if there is a competition and if there is a lot of money to be gained, as an individual club, I can fully understand why you would want to participate. However, if you think about the whole ecosystem, um, having it eat more match days in your international match calendar is really detrimental to the domestic leagues. And to be clear, what is the international match calendar? It's a TV schedule, and the more matches that are scheduled at FIFA, at UEFA level, the more downward pressure there is on the national television rights markets. And that is, I think, ultimately um, a bad choice for the competitive balance and for the game in itself, if you look at it as a whole.
To wrap up our conversation on a high note, would there be any book, series, movie, documentary about sports management or football in general that you could recommend to those watching or listening to us?
Yes, I've read the book of Stefan Szymanski, which I love because it's really so counterintuitive in terms of some of the truths that you hear a lot in football, and it uses data and analytics to prove your gut feeling wrong. And I think that's always a headspin. He's always been a speaker and a professor at the Pro League Business School in Antwerp, so I've thoroughly enjoyed reading that. It's kind of like the Freakonomics for football. Yeah.
Lorin, once again, thanks a lot for sharing Pro League's vision, ambition, and where you think the football in general, where the world of football is going. Thanks a lot once again.
Thank you, Pedro. Bye.
To everyone listening or hearing to us, you can just subscribe Folha Seca channel on YouTube, or also following Folha Seca on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so on. Have a great day.